Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper from Fit for All Fitness. I personally coach over 1,600 men and women to help better understand their hormones so they can lose weight and get their metabolism back on track. With this podcast, you're going to hear from me and my special guests about everything from metabolism to thyroid to weight loss. And we even talk a little bit of sexy time as we chat to spread more knowledge thick like butter on your hormones. If you're ready to learn, I'm ready to share, so let's do this. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Hormone Helper podcast. On this episode, I have a very special person with me today, a holistic nutritionist, a natural health educator, founder of Perfect Health Solutions, Margaret, but she goes by Maggie Millwood.
Yes.
Maggie, I'm so happy to have you on this podcast. I'm happy that we got to meet through networking and through kind of just happenstance, but you and I share what I believe is a lot of good alignment and a lot of similar views on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having a conversation kind of on what we want to share and bring to the podcast. And I thought it would be a great idea to have you on so we can talk a lot about menopause or monster pause, as some people call it, right? So, yeah, I mean, why don't you kind of do like a, expand on the introduction there and share people who you are and how you help people from a menopause perspective.
Sure. Well, first of all, Andrew, thank you so much for having me on the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm really excited to be here. And I don't think it was happenstance that we met. I think it was meant to be.
Ooh, nice.
I am a holistic nutritionist, as you said, and I focus on women's health as a general blanket. And then narrowing it down, I really love working with post-menopausal women. But of course, in order to understand what happens in the past the menopause, you have to be able to understand what happens during menopause, even before menopause. So for sure, that's one of my sweet spots. And of course, I'm a huge advocate for helping people to, especially women, to rebalance their bodies, to help them to be in full alignment with their mind, body, and soul from a holistic perspective. I agree with you. We do have lots of synergies from the perspective that, we are all about making sure that we leave those that we touch with a better, brighter, healthier future. So that's kind of a cool thing. Yeah, so that's kind of what I do. I've been doing it for a little while, but in terms of just getting more and more focused on the niching area. And also, I love looking at giving that alternative support to cancer clients, folks who have issues that have thrown their body out of metabolic balance. Of course, menopause is one of them too. And, just helping them to find an alternative approach to help them through from, a complete unified approach to their whole well-being. So that's me in a nutshell. I hope that's clear. If you have other questions, I'm sure you'll ask them.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
and I appreciate you for hopping on the podcast. It's an interesting thing when it comes to whether it's menopause or even people who are experiencing postmenopausal situation. I think oftentimes people have been trained to just seek the support from a hormone perspective or even from those changes from their just initial GP. And that's
Yes.
kind of, it's what grandma did. It's what mom did. It's what I'm going to do. And basically it's like, hey, you're going to get like your kind of like single once a year physical. You might wait another 3 years, miss a couple things, get a pap smear. And then by the time you know it, that doctor's like, oh, it's just menopause. And you're like, okay, got it. Like it's a
Right.
blanket description of everything. But I think, and I believe that you share the same thing. There's a lot that can be done to really help people go through that change,
Absolutely.
to help ensure that when they are transitioning through that period, that it's not something that they gain a ton of weight with. They don't feel overwhelmed. They're not sweating profusely. They're not having all of these crazy changes because their body is more or less regulated, right? Typically, when people are coming to you and they're experiencing like their post-menopause, what are some of the challenges or issues that they're coming to you with?
Well, I think ideally for a woman, it would be wonderful if she just sailed through those changing years and there were no symptoms. But unfortunately, of course, there are symptoms, and lots of women, because of the perspective on menopause in years gone by, where it was a hidden thing, people didn't talk about it, grandparents, mothers, they just didn't talk about it. So they just went through it and it was a thing, and they called it the change of life. And it was just something, of course, it's expected to happen, but there was a drama about it. Like before we started taping, you even mentioned that sometimes it's called monster pause. It's true. So what I want to bring to the table is to help to open up the idea that it's just a part of your life. It's just a part of your life cycle. And within that context, it's around education, because people didn't speak about it before, and because it was kind of the hidden transition that took place in a woman's life. Oftentimes it's accompanied by one major symptom, like depression. People, they don't talk about it, so they get kind of sad. They have particular negative viewpoints about what's happening to their bodies at this time, and so they get kind of sad, and they continue the cycle of not speaking about it. But there are lots of symptoms that happen during this time, and some are very obvious, like hot flashes. Lots of women know about hot flashes. Some are not so obvious. The depression might not be so obvious. They might not even associate it with menopause. But there's also the idea that as you are going into this new phase of life, there are other things that are happening with the body. And I'm sure you know this from a hormonal perspective. There are other things that are happening that, for example, blood sugar changes could be happening, and that can affect and create symptoms around menopause as well. And women just wouldn't be aware of that. They wouldn't even correlate the two or make, an indicator for themselves that this could be menopausal. One big shock for me when I was researching and learning more and more about this area of health was to learn that you suffer from aches and pains. And most people, when they're getting older, they assume, especially women, they assume that the aches and pains are related to age. You're just getting older, but it's not necessarily true. It could be very much related to menopause, and it's important to look for the underlying symptoms there. You could also, for example, guys at this age, they are also going through their own thing, but they might relate their aches and pains more to manual labor or physical exertion or exercise. But women will just assume that it's getting older or that their body's going through a change, but they won't really identify the fact that with, hot flashes, sweats, sleeplessness, insomnia, the aches and pains, that those are things that if you look underneath for what's causing it, you can actually resolve it quite easily and quite simply. And as you indicated also, if you look to balancing your hormones or finding out what's going on with your hormones, not just looking at measuring a 12-month cease of your menstrual cycle, but looking at other symptoms that are centered around the whole transition from what they used to call perimenopause. Perimenopause simply is what's surrounding menopause. And then as you move into post-menopausal years, which is where I like to land, because that's where you want to, as a woman, know that you're taking very good care of yourself because of what could develop. I hope I answered your question.
Oh, you did. I think an interesting thing from the aging perspective is this whole aspect of like us, quote unquote, getting older.
Yes.
One of the things that I think people should always look for, regardless if it's menopause related or not, you should always look for why you're not the outlier. So like you talk about age, for example, like, oh, everyone's getting older. Like immediately it just becomes that accepted or that normal part of like, of just life, where there are a lot of people who are mid 50s, who are probably approaching 60, who aren't experiencing these huge menopausal shifts, who or maybe postmenopausal and actually don't have any aches and pains, don't have crazy hot flashes. Right. So it's like, why can't you experience it that way? And we're so quick to just say, you know what, let's label it as this and give the power over to something that you can't control.
That's a very good point. Yeah, I agree. It's true. It's almost as if we want to always put a label on something for what's happening. And yes, sometimes you have to identify what's going on, but it does not have to be the norm. So I love that you utilized outlier. It's true. If more of us thought of the idea that we could be different, or we could level up ourselves a little bit more than the norm, then we probably would have more people seeking healthier outcomes. More people would be invested in their health. Very, very true.
Do you find that most women are only having conversations around menopause when they start to feel the symptoms and changes of menopause?
For sure. I would have to say yes, because Andrew, you're very lucky. You will never know what a hot flash feels like. But
Sweet.
but imagine from a holistic perspective, for example, the very idea of having a negative thought can trigger a hot flash. So you could be, going through your day normally, having a really fun day, and then suddenly something pops into your head. Maybe it's something that's traumatized you in the past. Maybe it's something in the immediate present that you're just, turn your mind to. And all of a sudden you have what feels like burning flames traveling up the back of your neck and invading your headspace to the point where you stop thinking, and all of a sudden you are literally a hothead. You have no ability to focus, and suddenly, before you can even figure out what's going on, there's this cooling down, and some women become instantly chilly. They start to freeze and they want to cover up immediately. So it's a kind of a bizarre, almost a traumatizing effect in that moment, because then you're like, what's happening? And if you don't know, if you have no clue what to expect or that it's coming, like if you're not even aware that you're going into the menopausal years, if you're really, really, distant from a relationship with your body and what symptoms could present and what's happening, and you go into absolute shock. And that is definitely when a woman will speak about it, because she'll be like, what's happening to me? I don't know. But from the perspective of being informed, if you are informed, you will still have an idea. But that's even more, of an opportunity for you to say, well, could this be? So you'll still question it. You'll still ask if you're not aware. So I think the more and more, and I'm so glad we are having this conversation, because you're going to put it out there. And, the more and more that women listen and understand that these are things that can happen to them, and that there are ways that you can reduce the impact. For example, I don't know if you know this, but women in Japan don't have hot flashes. So
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, something.
Why Japan specifically? Is it like?
Well, I have a theory, and I don't think it's an unfounded theory. It must have been something I read, but it also makes perfect sense to me as I reiterate it to you. I believe it's because of the diet. It could also because, Japanese are totally chill and they don't have stressful thoughts. I don't know. But I think from the perspective of soy being a phytoestrogenic food, and it being a dominant food of that culture, that we're not getting into the non-GMO versus the GMO, because obviously you'd want to be eating the non-GMO version of soy. But from a Japanese perspective, that's a land of soy. They love edamame, they love tempeh and those kinds of foods, all soy-based. And soy is a very strong estrogenic food. So I would posit to you that that is perhaps one of the reasons, because the diet is already balanced with enough estrogen that when a woman loses her estrogen or starts to lose her estrogen, which is what's happening during menopause, then that phytoestrogenic food, which operates differently from a supplemental estrogen or from medically presented estrogenic medication, it's totally different. So their diet naturally absorbs the estrogen and they function differently, because a hot flash, at the root of it, I don't know if you know this. Do you know the root of what causes a hot flash?
Yes, but our viewers and listeners might not know. So
okay, so let's educate. So when you're losing estrogen, this trigger happens where your blood vessels suddenly relax for no particular reason, because you're losing estrogen. Your blood vessels become less supple, less flexible, a little bit more rigid. And suddenly there is this relaxed approach because you've lost some estrogen. And so your blood vessels dilate, which means they widen and an instant flow of blood develops. And that's why you get that sudden rush of blood to your head and boom, you have a hot flash. So that's why I'm thinking that maybe the Japanese as a culture not having hot flashes is because that phytoestrogenic effect of their steady everyday diet is producing a lot slower, more modulated response to that estrogen loss. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about more about phytoestrogen because there's two things.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing it from a postmenopausal standpoint
Yes.
of it being beneficial, which it totally is.
Yes.
The aspect of estrogenic foods or estrogenic compounds now in our day-to-day routine.
Yes.
One thing that I'm finding is that people are getting more menopausal issues significantly earlier than they would have in the past.
Yes.
Where
Yes.
you're having people early 30s experiencing full-blown menopause where that wasn't normal before.
True.
Where
very good
when
observation.
you're looking in the 50s to 60s, that's not a thing that existed, right?
Right.
You talk about foods being estrogenic, which means that there are some foods, of course, that now it's not chemically estrogen, but it's foods that change the way you're utilizing that estrogen kind of as placeholders.
Right.
But what are you seeing in terms of that change with, people getting menopause earlier and earlier? Their symptoms are becoming a lot more due to the things that we have that are so much estrogen way early in our lives.
I think it's happening on both ends of the spectrum too, not just earlier, but it seems that ladies in their 70s are getting symptoms of menopause when they thought that it had finished. And I postulate again, I'm positing and postulating a lot today. I believe that it has something to do with the fake estrogens out there that people are not aware of, the xenoestrogen effect, where if you're utilizing a lot of plastics in your life and you're heating them up in a microwave, for example, your body can't tell the difference between a fake estrogen and other estrogens. And so you're getting this sort of toxicity mixed into your hormonal balance. And as a result, your body not being able to tell the difference, or just the exposure to general toxins. Your liver is getting a bit of a bad rap there, and you're not being able to clear those excess estrogens that are going through your system too. So that could be part of the reason. I haven't been able to physically identify why somebody might go into early menopause outside of particular health issues that they might have. But that's what I would hazard a guess around, that it has to do with managing your liver health and making sure that you are balancing your hormones and just being aware. One of my favorite things to let my clients know is that they need to listen to their bodies. And if you are having a hot flash at 30, don't ignore it, obviously, because that's telling you a message. And even if it's scary because you think it could be related to losing your estrogen, there are things that in our more advanced world now that you can do to rebalance your system and get you back on track so that you don't go into early menopause. But you're right, it never used to happen. And I would guess also that has to do with stress. A lot of stress, creating a lot of inflammation, creating a lot of imbalances in the body, for sure.
The biggest thing with women's hormones is that 22 to 28 day cycle, your hormones are changing every single time, and there's that month to month fluctuation,
right?
And then on top of that, add the opportunity for there to be a fluctuation every time you have a pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're going to have a fluctuation pre-menopause, during menopause, and then post-menopause.
Right.
And there's a lot of opportunities for an imbalance to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we discredit the amount of change that our hormones go through. And a lot of the times we can't connect. And you talked about this earlier, which I had written down here. Sometimes we feel something and we believe, oh, it might just be this. Like, for example,
Yes.
every time someone experiences a cycle, they might get a little bit emotional, and they're like, I'm an emotional wreck during my period. Well, no,
Right.
that's actually a hormonal change, or again, a change in hot flash, a result of a hormonal change. A lot of these things is actually a symptom of the body trying to correct
Yes, I
than it
agree.
is trying to keep it stable.
I agree. You make a good point, because I literally went through most of my life thinking that the menstrual cycle had to produce pain. Not that I had a lot of pain, but I always had some kind of pain. And I assumed, like lots of other women, lots of other young women around me, that this was the normal part of the menstrual cycle, only to discover that it didn't have to be that way. And that's, I guess, part of the reason why I want to champion postmenopausal women, to let them know that as they surrender to their menopausal years, it doesn't have to be that way, the way that, we've been exposed to, assuming this is the way you go through menopause and this is the way you go into your postmenopausal years. It doesn't have to be the way that's expected. So I'm so grateful that you mentioned the outlier, because I want more and more women to become outliers, to know that they can color outside the lines and, thrive and do well beyond what they expect or think menopause should look like, or
100%.
postmenopausal years. Yeah.
And I think one of the biggest, I don't want to say fears, because really nobody should fear whatever their circumstances, but there are notable concerns with people to start this process of exploring, whether it's changes to their hormones, whether it's changes to themselves, because a lot of the times people, what I get all the time is, Andrew, I don't want to take medication.
Yep.
I think everyone universally knows that whether a medication is there to help you or not, the higher the dosage, then the longer you're on a medication, the higher the chance that there is of you're dealing with some type of a side effect later. Like, that's
That's
kind
true. I
of the
think most people
staple,
know that. Yeah.
of changing things. But what I'm feeling like a lot of ladies now are starting to understand is that there's a lot of natural things, like us making changes with food to make sure that, again, you talk about having foods that have natural levels of estrogen in them, in which we can change somebody's diet and do it in a way that we are increasing their natural level, where we can help, whether it's helping minimize the amount of medication that somebody has to take, or prevent someone from being on medication at all, that there are a lot of other options to go out there and to do that and make that change.
Absolutely. And many roads lead to the balance of the human body. So it's kind of a good thing for folks to know that just one path isn't necessarily going to get them the ultimate solution that they want. So it's good to look at, a variety of ways to resolve the issue. And I agree with you. More and more people, I believe, are tapping into the idea that maybe medication long term is not the real solution for them. So that's a very good point too.
Now, because during each stage of menopause, people would have to do different things, or there's going to be different changes that you have to make. So, for example, us talking about the estrogenic foods, if someone's estrogen's already really high, probably not a good idea to then just flood with even more of that change, right? So what would be the difference in someone's nutrition, or in the way that you would treat a person who is in the experience like menopause is occurring to them, versus they've transitioned out of menopause and now they're trying to manage kind of the aftermath of the transition out of that?
Okay, well, to be clear, I don't treat people. Remember that.
True. Yes,
Right,
that is
right.
the common word
Don't
that
want you to
people
get into trouble
recognize.
there.
100%. Yes, right. But help make those
Right. So
help
let's
guide them through the
say,
process.
so if I understood you correctly, you're saying what would be the difference in the approach between someone who is going through menopause or someone who has gone through menopause and is now postmenopausal?
Yeah, you got it.
Well, since my expertise is more in the postmenopausal years, I would definitely say that I would want to protect. I'll start with them. I'd want to protect the things that can create issues for you postmenopausally. So estrogen, as you know, is an anabolic hormone. It builds up the body. It helps us to have supple, beautiful skin. It makes sure that the connective tissue all around the body is working really well. So your hair looks really shiny. You have, amazing abilities to build muscle tone. You have a great way to metabolize your proteins, carbs, and fats. So your body balance is really amazing when you have estrogen, assumedly the ideal. And when you're losing it, internally, I mentioned earlier, the blood vessels, for example, they're breaking down internally. You can't see that, but they are. So you want to look up for certain aspects of your system that's going to be needing a little bit more attention. So your cardiovascular health will be really important. So you would ramp up, the support for that. That goes with improving your oxygen levels, making sure that you have more omega-3s in your diet, which will help to block inflammation in the cardiovascular system. You want to nourish your heart health, basically. So even eating a little bit more like a Mediterranean diet would be something very useful for a postmenopausal woman. You want to also make sure that you're taking care of your bones, because bones, although it sounds like, they're rock hard and they're, not real tissue. They're living tissue. And you want to recognize that even though most of our growth spurts happen in the younger years up until I think about 2025, then you also want to restore bone health because your body is slowing down in its regeneration of bone. So you want to make sure that you're taking in nutrition or nutrients and also supporting your bone strength and your bone density by moving your body well. So you want to make sure things like food-based calcium would be my first pick. And then if you have to, depending on any results you might get, you would want to maybe move into something supplemental if that's the preference. If the listener is a natural health seeker, which I'm sure they are, then they will want to seek out food and then supplementation. Another system that would be very important is your blood sugar management system. You would want to make sure that you are not going to suddenly pack on the pounds, which is a huge complaint of a lot of menopausal and postmenopausal women, because your body slows down. The regeneration activity of cells, it's just slower. So you want to make sure that you find that balance that's unique to your system. And as I always say, I'm a big supporter of taking care of your liver. So that would be something that they would definitely should look into. And that's mainly postmenopausally. You also want to, lots of ladies have this, unfortunately, but there tends to be a backlog or a buildup of estrogen that hasn't been removed from the body, and that can land in breast tissue. And lots of ladies get diagnosed with breast cancer as a result. So taking good care of your breast health, making sure it's not just the only cancer that you could develop, but it seems to be one that a lot of women develop postmenopausally. So you would want to, yes, you can have the phytoestrogenic foods. Obviously, you're not going to have 10 cups of soy every day, so that's not expected, but you want to pick foods like flax, even chickpeas, along with non-GMO soy, to make sure that you're putting back some estrogens. But at the same time, you want to nourish your liver health, support your liver so that it clears, if you are one of those, building up estrogen in your breast tissue. And then essentially, I would say overall, just develop a really healthy lifestyle, which is why I love supporting postmenopausal women, because oftentimes their mindset or their vision for their life is that, they're on the other side of life and they're in decline. And that doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way. During menopause, I would say it's a little bit more person specific, depending on their history. Like you mentioned, having kids, your hormones go up and down. You've gone through the whole menarche to menopause cycling. You've hit it and your body is behaving a little bit erratically. So you'd have to address it a little bit more. Postmenopausally, you don't seem to have the crazy erratic, unpredictable symptoms as you do during menopause. Because one day you could wake up and you feel great. Next day you could wake up and, or maybe you didn't sleep because,
Yeah.
one of your hormones are way out there. So during menopause, it's a little bit different. I would say, for sure, as a woman, you should track your menstrual cycle very closely. And unlike grandmothers' generations or even mom generations that have gone before us, we now have an app for that, which is kind of cool. So
Nice.
I don't know if you're familiar with any of them, but
I'm
I
not
will
familiar
tell
with
you
the app,
one.
but
One
I
of my
tell
favorite
people.
ones is Period Tracker.
Period
So
tracker? Okay.
yeah, so in the Period Tracker, you can actually track your symptoms, you can track your mood, you can track the menstrual cycle flow, you can track the dates that they're expected versus the dates that it actually happened. So if there's a lady out there who wants to like really focus in and she feels maybe she's having some erratic symptoms, it's a great place to start. Download the app, track it, and that will give you the ability to inform your practitioner, inform your medical team, inform whoever you've decided is part of your health balance, to inform them, because an informed client slash patient is one who owns their health. And that's a big
Yes.
passion of mine. I believe in encouraging women to take full charge of their health. No one knows your body like you. And if you listen close enough, you'll know more. So that's kind of my goal.
I think
So as you
from a
said, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
sorry, no worries. I think a big point to touch on that is like sometimes the symptoms that people can feel very random. Like, why
Right.
is this happening to me?
Right.
But if like the purpose of tracking is not for you to obsess over period dates, like
Right.
that's a big aspect.
I
It's
agree
not
with
about
that.
like you're like, oh, the symptoms happened again. It's really about awareness. So like, just like, for example, like you don't know where to change your meals if you're not aware of your hunger and your fullness cues. It's effectively the same thing. You don't
Right.
know how your body is operating on a day to day if you're not sure or you don't have a rough idea of when hormone cycles change, what actually is affected and what happens to you, right? So
Very
to
true.
the people who maybe aren't, and I didn't realize that there was an app for this, but I always tell people to
There's an
track
app
their
for
period.
everything. Are you kidding
Yeah,
me?
I know, right? I probably should have looked, but it goes to
It's
show you,
okay.
right? So,
Now you know.
but yeah, it's important. It's important that they track that for sure.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so going back to like the foods during menopause or how to approach the menopausal years, I'd say it's a little bit more specific, and just even what you said, like the variety of symptoms. You can't make an assumption, so you have to kind of work with your practitioner a little bit closer, because um, it could be aches and pains caused by something that is literally related to drop off in estrogen, or it could be aches and pains from something completely different. Some of the symptoms are very vague, like you tend to get a lot of headaches. Hormonal headaches are common, and um, you could put it down to a hormonal headache and just assume, or you could try and figure it out and track that as well for your practitioner, because uh, it could be something else, and you really don't want to make assumptions. Or even the lack of sleep, you're not sleeping well. It could just, I shouldn't say just, because stress is dangerous, but it could be stress, or it could be stress and menopause, or it could be something else why you're not sleeping. So some of the symptoms that are related to the menopausal years are very tricky. It's hard to make a judgment, and my best advice would be to really aim to take charge of your health during those years and try and troubleshoot from a health perspective what you're going through. And once you kind of narrow it down to being a hormonal issue, and you can see like one major symptom being maybe the erratic behavior of your menstrual cycle, then you can pin it down to being menopausal and seek to eat a little bit more restoratively for your health and move your body differently. But sometimes, again, if the lady has had a history throughout her life of erratic menstrual cycles, then there's a whole other kit that she has to put in place for that too. So
Yes.
I find the menopausal years are tricky, which is exactly why it's kind of exciting that you also want to seek to help them rebalance their hormones, because that's really, really important. And from a postmenopausal perspective, my goal is to help to really move them into that place of taking full charge of their health so that no further complications develop. And I think a lot of women used to just surrender themselves. So, oh, menopause, life is over. But I'm here to tell them, no, it's not. I want to be known as a yes, you can nutritionist that will help you from discovery to recovery, as I say.
100%.
Yeah.
It's interesting. So I'm writing things down as you're talking, because it's triggering a lot of stuff for me. So there's two aspects here, right? That you had talked about in both post and during. So you talked about stress, which a lot of people,
that's a big one,
under credit the change that stress can have in terms of the impact, as well as you talked about estrogen kind of being your fat usage hormone. And a lot of people, I don't think, recognize the connection of your body's metabolism with estrogen and cortisol, so for those of you who are listening who don't know, like, cortisol and estrogen are like two partners that talk to each other all the time. They're yin and yang. Cortisol is really not, like, people think it's like your stress hormone. It's really like how much gas you got in the tank, how much cortisol energy you're supposed to operate with. But if we're always undershorting that tank, or if there's always a time where we have an overusage, this is where your body's gonna then say to estrogen, hey, either use more fat or store more fat so we can use for later. Right. And a change that I think it should be really important for us to talk about is in the difference of that relationship. What do those conversations look like during menopause versus post-menopause between cortisol and estrogen? Because those conversations look totally different.
Yes, that's true. Like, post-menopausally too, Andrew, because of how the world is, we have to have the stress discussion for sure. And packing on the pounds doesn't go away even if you balance your hormones during menopause. Packing on the pounds doesn't just disappear. And there's yet another hormone that joins the mix called insulin. Yes. So they're all happy friends until they're not. And so
I love that.
So you want to, like, the cortisol hormone, of course, as you mentioned, people take it for granted and they think it's just stress, but it literally is the hormone that keeps us alive. And as you mentioned, one of the ways that it keeps us alive is to actually put some storage of fat away for a rainy day, so it can use that excess glucose to, fuel the fire that becomes the fight, fright, and flight syndrome.
Yeah.
And because of how we live, especially in North America, I think we don't tend to utilize that fat storage even before menopausal years. Even, gentlemen go through this too. They go through the andropause and they don't even realize what's going on. And then they have what they call the bear belly. But it's bigger than that. It's all tied into how much stress are you going through. And as I mentioned to you a while back when we spoke, these are the sandwich years. So you're sandwiched in between the obligation to maybe older aging parents. You're sandwiched in with maybe younger adults leaving and going off to university. You're stuck in the middle. Maybe your career is changing. You have a lot of stress going on. And maybe a pandemic will hit. No, God forbid, never again. But
never again.
But never again.
Never again.
But like, it can be a situation where you just have all of this stuff going on, and then in the middle of it, your body, as you rightly said, is telling you, oh, store more fat just in case. That's the last thing you need for another change to happen. So it's kind of important for us as humans generally to understand how those hormones work, and also for women to realize this is a time when you speak to yourself, you let somebody speak calm and peace into your life, that you take time for yourself, that you de-stress, that you breathe more, that you really experience what breathing is like. And it's a balance. Like, I know you support that activity and the movement of the body, which is really important for general good health and balance. But in the menopausal years, you need to take it a little bit easier. You need to fold in some good strength training, but you also want to fold in breathing and some stretching, some gentle exercise that helps you to de-stress. Because some ladies I know are really like A-type exercisers, and they go, 150% over the mark to try and beat this sudden gaining of weight and pounds, packing on pounds or changing their body mass index, whatever.
Yeah.
But it actually works against them. So being a little bit more gentle with yourself during menopause is really important. And post-menopause, I would say you have to do strength training. It's not an option. You have to do it because your bones depend on you, and your bones are your movement, and your bones help your, the symbiotic relationship between your muscle and your bones are really important to build that strength. So if you are a fabulous adult who wants to go into your later years and be even more fabulous, then you really have to throw off the idea that I don't like strength training.
Yeah.
And just put the idea into your head that, moving your body, building your muscle tone is imperative post-menopause. And you can start during menopause, but I would even highly recommend that you start before. Try and do it. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a professional athlete.
Yeah.
You just have to make sure you're balancing and moving your body well.
From a kinesiology and a personal training perspective, because I also have the benefit of looking through that lens as well too. I think a lot of people who overtrain or who like spend a lot of time exercising, they don't realize that activity is it's about structured damage. It's about I just want to do enough damage, just a little bit, so I can repair and grow a little bit stronger.
Right.
Training more doesn't bring more results. Training more doesn't make things more better. It just makes more damage that we have to repair. So twice a week, 3 times a week, consistently, half an hour, it's all you need. It's not, it doesn't have to be incredibly intense. That being said, I agree with you 100%. Activity is so important because the body, as a really simple machine, will literally let go of your muscle if you're not using it, because it's just work to keep it if it's not there, right?
Absolutely true.
I think that is huge, and I appreciate you sharing quite a bit on both post-menopause and during menopause. I feel like a lot of the clients that I work with, as well as a lot of ladies who listen to this podcast, that's probably the number one challenge that kind of, I don't want to call it a midlife crisis because it's not, but it's like that's the midlife transition.
It shouldn't be,
right? It shouldn't be, but it is for people for sure, right? And that is amazing, and I encourage all of you listening as well to again. So you've got an amazing Instagram. I believe it is the Perfect Nutritionist, right? Is your tag for Insta?
Yes.
Awesome. Is there any other place where people can find and connect with you, Maggie, to whether it's absorb more content on things like this, or even just get more information if there's someone who like are in a postmenopausal state and are like, hey, you know what, I want to take this next step and, make the changes with Maggie?
Well, thank you. Just to stress, the perfect nutritionist doesn't mean I'm perfect. It might mean I'm the perfect nutritionist for you, though.
So I love it.
That's the whole idea behind that. And I love Instagram. I love interacting with folks on Instagram, but I also have a website. It's www.perfecthealthsolutions.ca. That's my favorite place for people to reach out to me. And you can also jump on my newsletter. I love interacting with folks there. Nice. So that's kind of a fun thing. I do have a few videos on YouTube, but I haven't really fleshed that out a lot yet. And there's supposed to be a blog coming this year. So let's see what happens there.
Oh, there we go. Well, I will be the first person to check out your blog. I think
I look forward to that.
Yeah, I think blogs and YouTube, people underestimate the power of YouTube. and
Yes.
more
Yes.
eyes than I think we realize. So I've even
Yes.
been doing, as of lately, for those of you tuning in too, if you actually want to see our faces while talking, I've been recording the podcast so you guys
I
can go
know.
on to there, which you're like, yay, I had to be prim and proper for this. But no, honestly, I truly am grateful for having such great relationships with professionals and practitioners like you. And
Thank you.
I think one of the best things that I think exists in the health industry, period, is the abundance of people who are willing to help, who are willing to support, and willing to work together. And that's the most important thing. Is your health team doesn't just have to look like a doctor, and that's it.
That is
There
true.
can be a host of people. I know I have many people that are working with me and doing physiotherapy for knees. I'm seeing Medcan for a bunch of other stuff. So it's great to be able to know that you can be supported and that
Mm-hmm.
abundance is available to us. And I encourage everybody to. I will make sure to drop, of course, Maggie's website link for the perfecthealthsolutions.ca. I'll drop that in the show notes as well as her Instagram. I encourage you guys to connect with her on any questions and stuff. And hopefully you guys got some great value for that. Let us know if there are any other questions as well too in the show notes that you guys have, guys and gals, because sometimes people are listening for partners or for family members.
True.
Any other questions that you've got on menopause or even on the post kind of hormonal changes and stuff, let us know. I think a great opportunity is to answer some specific questions maybe on a potential round 2 if you guys are still curious about a couple of things. So but I appreciate, Maggie, you hopping on and sharing all of your golden nuggets with us today.
Thank you, Andrew. I really feel very honored that you invited me to be here. And as you were speaking about, the team that we should put around ourselves, the thought of the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go farther, you should go together. And that jumped into my mind. And the idea behind that from a perspective of the human body and what we bring to the table is really important, because if you think that you need a team, you do, because the human body is complex. And as you know, I like to deal with people with complex health issues because of that very reason. It's not any one person that can solve the problem in the long run. It takes many roads to get you there. So if you set up your team to help you get through it, it makes a huge, huge difference to your overall health and well-being.
I love that.
Thanks so much for inviting me to be here, because I learned something from you too. It's good to see your perspective and to see your passion for balancing hormones and what you give to the folks, your listeners, as well as your clientele. So that's kind of a cool thing too.
I appreciate that. And I literally want to highlight one word before we end this. You said complex. You didn't say hard. And I love that, because most people misconstrue the two. Where if something is complex, it's difficult. This process doesn't have to be hard. Menopause doesn't have to be difficult. You don't have to quote unquote struggle through it, or even call it, like I use the word monster pause before the call, because that's what one of our clients that's how sense. It felt to her. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be that way. So I appreciate you, even whether it was consciously or subconsciously, putting the actual context to what the situation and challenge is in front of people. So I appreciate that. Yeah,
that's a good point. Well, I appreciate
Excellent.
You. So
Awesome.
Thank you so much again. And maybe there will be a round 2. That would be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, gals, if you're listening, let us know what you want in terms of round 2. I think that's great. But other than that, we will call it a great episode. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we will catch you all later. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site? We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.